Hello, this is Eugenia with Radiant Warrior Living. Today my show is about emotional triggers. Emotional triggers are things and situations and people that happen around us that cause a certain emotional reaction from us. The reason I find this topic important is that all of us as human beings deal with certain things in our lives. And usually we get caught up in patterns, which means similar situations, similar scenarios, relationships or interactions with people that trigger us or create certain reactions in us. And usually those emotional triggers are things that are showing up on a regular basis and are ways to tell us that there is some kind of an emotional button where we feel vulnerable and we have a story behind that emotional trigger. So it's not the other people, it's not the situations, it's not the scenarios, it's something within us that is causing our reaction. And it's important to understand that, because when you can understand that, you can actually find a way to notice your reactions and notice what triggers you and notice what type of patterns show up, so that you can actually start working on them and you can start understanding what your emotional reactions are, so you can actually work through them and find different ways to deal with them and find ways to understand yourself better and grow as a person and develop an intuition and also tune into how you're feeling and what's causing certain feelings within you. So the reason emotional triggers is something that I find very important is that the clients who I work with usually talk about very similar situations or people showing up in their life. And sometimes what happens is that when we are not clear on the patterns that we have, those patterns will continue repeating themselves. And that's why it's very important to pay attention. And sometimes it's hard for us to pay attention because we get so caught up in an emotion that we can't notice what it's doing to us, and we can't always clearly see what's happening. And sometimes it's good to talk it through with someone, or to talk to a professional, to talk to a coach, or to talk to a therapist and understand what's causing certain triggers. So, emotions are there for a reason. Emotions are with us for a reason. Emotions are our friends, emotions and feelings. And very often in our life, since we've been very, very young, we've been taught that showing certain emotions is not okay, that reacting a certain way is not okay, that we have to hold back, and that we can't be ourselves, especially in public. When we were young, we could have been, how when kids have tantrums, it's very embarrassing for a parent. But kids have to learn to deal with their emotions and to also be able to understand that, what they're feeling, when they're feeling something, they want to express it. And what often happens with the adult's reaction to a child's emotion, the child shuts those emotions off and shuts down and feels that it's not okay to express how they feel. So it's very healthy to talk to your child and to help them understand that what they're feeling is okay, and there's appropriate and inappropriate ways to show and express their emotions, and certain things are sometimes blown out of proportion. We've all been there. We've all seen people around us where we have noticed that their reaction to something has been very inappropriate to the situation. So, for example, somebody could not find something, and I'm sure that we've all had people in our household, and they get really frustrated and mad, and they have sort of one of those tantrums or one of those upset moments, or people who have the road rage. Sometimes if somebody tries to go in front of them, and of course none of us ever do that, but somebody tries to go in front of them, and they feel like they're cut off, they feel like they haven't been asked, and they didn't want the person to go in front of them, so they get mad and they start chasing the car. So the road rage can be very, very inappropriate reaction to something quite small. So the reason appropriate and inappropriate is coming up here is because there's a few elements that are at play. Emotions are appropriate. The emotions are important. And knowing what you're feeling and understanding how you're feeling and what is causing you to feel a certain way is helpful to go through life, and to also understand what are some of the things that cause you to feel an experience or to experience the emotion that might be a draining emotion. So emotions are not bad or good. They are just emotions, and feelings are not good or bad. They're there to show you where you're at, to help you understand your reactions and how you're moving through life. So they are your friends as long as you don't judge it, as long as you notice your reactions, and as long as you notice what you're feeling and connect to that emotion. And it's also helpful to understand what is causing the emotion, especially, or a feeling, especially if these feelings are draining for you and they cause you to be low energy, and they cause you to be in a state of we call it catabolic energy, so the energy that's draining, the energy that's low, the energy that's causing you to feel a sense of fear, a sense of sadness, a sense of anger. Those emotions are not productive emotions. So they're not good or bad, they're just not productive. They're not helpful. They can drain you physically, they can drain you mentally, they can drain you spiritually. But understanding what causes those emotions and then finding ways to deal with those triggers is what I want to talk about here today. A good question to ask yourself in a certain situation, especially when you're feeling triggered, or when you feel that you are not sort of balanced, that you feel a little bit off, is, what am I feeling? What am I feeling is a very direct question to yourself, and it's a very factual question. How am I feeling is the question that can cause judgment. So there's a little bit of a difference. So when you ask yourself, what am I feeling? You can pinpoint, whether it's sadness, joy, fear, guilt, love, excitement. What are you feeling? So when you ask yourself that question, it allows you to be very direct and on point, and very connected and tuned in to what you're feeling. So very often we actually ask someone, how are you feeling? And that can cause a judgment, and it can cause somebody to either not be honest, or ourselves to not be honest, or start judging the way we're feeling. So if you can start moving away from the how question, but to what question, to allow yourself to be more factual, to allow yourself to be more connected to the feeling without creating a story around it. When you find certain situations that trigger you, it's very helpful to start writing things down. I even think that having an emotional journal sometimes is very helpful, especially when we're going through something in our life, when there's a period of high stress. And all of us go through stressful periods, and sometimes that stress can last for quite some time, especially when we don't release the emotions, when we're not connected to that feeling that we might be experiencing. And at the times of change, for example, or transition, it can cause a sense of stress. It can cause a sense of upset because the foundations are changing, or certain things are changing, and cause an adjustment and require for us to adapt to something, to adapt to a new situation, to be more open to something, which is not always that easy, especially if you're going through a transition. For example, people who go through a divorce, people who go through becoming an empty nesters whose kids are going to college or university, and all of a sudden they don't have their kids at home, and there's this sense of disconnect from their kids. They don't know what's going on. Also, the physical environment changes, or somebody, a loss in your family, or you lost a friend or a loved one. All of these things are major changes that require transition, that require an adjustment in our life. And understanding what you're feeling, and understanding how it causes you to feel, and what it emotes in you, is key to be able to clearly see where you're at, but also find a way to help you get through it. So if you are going through a transition, or if you are in a period of high stress and you're experiencing a lot of things, and it feels like things are not clear, I suggest for you to have an emotional journal. And that could be a journal that you use regularly. You can take notes, and it can be something that you use for a period of time. And if you're not somebody who can keep it consistently, I suggest that you at least do it for a couple of days, especially if you feel like there's a lot of things happening and a lot of things going on, and you're feeling and reacting to a lot of things that may be a little bit out of the ordinary for you. So when you have an emotional journal, you can write things down. So this happened and this was my reaction. I felt angry. I felt sad. I felt guilty. When we feel sad, it's a normal emotion of losing something, or feeling like we might lose something. Or it could be, a nostalgic feeling of a certain memory that, creates sadness that it might never happen, or something might never come back, and something is gone. Or guilt, when we see ourselves a certain way as a human being, or we see that we're, obligated to do something and we don't do it for a number of reasons, we feel the guilt. And, guilt is actually a very heavy emotion. It's a very catabolic emotion, so emotion that causes you to feel low energy, but we all experience it in our life. The same with fear. Fear of losing something. Jealousy can be caused by fear of losing something, or fear of losing our job, fear of circumstances or something happening in life that's completely out of our control. All of these things are normal emotions and feelings that show up in our life for a number of reasons, and that are normal to a human life. So it's more about seeing where you're at and what you're experiencing and feeling. And the same with emotions such as love. Love is such an all-encompassing emotion, and we can feel love for people around us, for our pets, for other people's pets, for the world. And it's an emotion that can be really, really strong and even overwhelming sometimes. And we can experience, sadness and fear because of love, even though it's not really caused by love. But because we love something, we can feel an attachment to something. So one of the things that can be kind of something to explore is when we feel a feeling of, when we experience a certain attachment to outcomes. And we look for circumstances outside of our life, outside of our control, and we want those circumstances to turn out a certain way. And we put all our emotions and feelings into something that's outside of our control, into expectations of other people's reactions, into expectations of something, a result of our work or something we're doing, and that's when we can create a feeling of disappointment, or a feeling of something very, very negative, because we can do all the right things, but we cannot control the outcome of what happens. And when we put our feelings and our emotions and everything that we're doing in the expectation of a certain outcome, that can be definitely something that can cause a lot of upset in our life. So it's oftentimes understanding that, where is the part that is fully dependent on you and what you're doing and your work and who you are, and understanding which part of the process or a situation is outside of your control. That way you can create a sense of attachment, or a sense of clarity on what are some of the things that are directly linked to what you're doing, and what are some of the things that are not linked to what you're doing and also are completely outside of your control. And when you know the difference between things that you can control and things you can't control, you can at least mentally and emotionally create a sense of unattachment, disattachment, disconnect, where you know that you've done everything you could, and the circumstances and the results, which means it's other people's reactions, how circumstances turn out, the result of other people seeing your work or who you are is out of your control, and you realize that you can do everything in your power and the result might be not exactly what you expect. So when you create a sense of openness around it and you clearly understand that those things are outside of your control, you can create a sense of reality, or you can create a much better clarity and much better understanding of what's going on. And you can work through something as if the outcome is not what you wanted or a little bit different. So you won't feel such a huge letdown or disappointment, because you'll understand and see clearly where your portion was and where your part was and where things were not in your control. And when you have that sense of clarity, you're able to clearly see, how much more work you could have done, and, be very honest with yourself. There could be more, and if not, then the rest of it is part that comes to you to understand and let go and potentially accept what happened. Meaning that there were circumstances outside of your control that have taken over or that caused the result to be this. But at least that way, you have a very clear boundary between things that you're able to control and things that you're not able to control. I find that oftentimes, people worry about the weather or worry about things, somebody's reaction, and things that are completely outside of their control, and we all do it. So when you're able to clearly define those boundaries for yourself, you'll feel a much better, I find it brings a sense of lightness into your life, because you understand that you can do everything in your power and things still might not work out the way that you want them to. But you can intend for them to work out the way you want them to, and you can do your best and then see what happens. But it allows you to create a certain sense of attachment to what you're doing and caring about the situation without being attached to the outcome. So I'm sorry to sort of take this into such deep and into providing so much detail around it, but I do feel that it's important to talk about what's in our control and what's not in our control. So the emotional journal is something that can help you over a period of time. It can be something that you do for a short period of time to understand how you react to circumstances. Those things can be triggered by our family, certain family members, certain situations at work. Things can be continuing on a pattern and repeating themselves. And when you're writing those things down in the emotional journal and your reaction to a situation, especially when you see that reaction maybe is slightly inappropriate, meaning that it's a little bit out of proportion to what happened, then at least you can see what are some of the patterns and what's going on with how you're feeling about a situation or a person. And like I said, when there's certain buttons that are pushed by other people or situations, those buttons already exist. The triggers don't happen when you don't have any attachment or there's nothing that needs to be worked out. Usually things trigger us because there is already an emotional button in place. So it's understanding where is that emotional button coming from, and what is the story that you're telling yourself about a particular situation, or is it reminding you of something that has happened in the past where you created a certain story or made a certain conclusion, and now everything that happens that's familiar or similar to that situation, that's causing you to trigger and react a certain way. And just please understand that emotional triggers are absolutely normal. And and buttons are absolutely normal, because as human beings we go through experiences, and what we take out from those experiences, and we need to collect experiences so that we can exist and we can move through life, and those experiences are very important. It's how we deal with those experiences and how we allow them to show up in our life is what's important. And sometimes the experiences can be like a heavy baggage that we carry around. They can be kind of like a big, heavy backpack that is there, and it's kind of like it's filled with rocks. And that's when those experiences can be draining. I read somewhere recently that wisdom is an experience that we've been through without an emotional attachment. So when we're able to gain insights and lessons from what we experience and what we go through, that's when we can call it wisdom. So that we learn something without attaching a story to it that is causing us to be low energy, or to show up a certain way, and we're bitter, or we feel a certain sense of anger. So it's gaining something from the experience without attaching ourselves to something and now labeling everything a certain way, right? Which would limit our vision and our view of life. So wisdom is something that we learn and we have an insight, but we don't attach to it emotionally. So it is something that takes a while to kind of, I think, to understand. But when you go through something, and if it's an experience that is major, transition or major change in your life, it's understanding what is it that you've learned from it, and what is it that you've taken away that allowed you to understand yourself and life a little bit deeper, and that didn't put an additional heavy rock in that backpack that you carry, in your baggage, in your luggage that you carry through life. Because if it's a heavy rock that is causing you to really feel drained and feel like you no longer can move forward, then that experience is something that needs to be worked through a little bit more, and that requires a little more learning, a little more insight gained from it, so that it can become that pebble that you can carry with you, that is there, but it's not causing you to feel like you're carrying something, such a huge burden, and something that's really causing you to feel drained and upset, or causing you to make certain conclusions that life is this way, or people are this way, because that only limits how you view things and how you can move forward through life. So just in conclusion, if you feel triggered, there's a process that I would like to suggest for you to go through, and it's pretty easy, even though it might take some time to get used to, because when we are feeling something, or when we are feeling triggered, it's really hard to catch yourself in that situation. Sometimes it's really about being very tuned in and understanding when the emotion is coming on, or when the feeling is coming on, and it's really stopping and seeing, okay, I'm really feeling this trigger, and that trigger, usually an emotional trigger, would show up in your body in one way or another. I find that our body is such an amazing tool. I don't know, our body is there for a reason. So where do you feel that trigger? Some people have a headache coming on when they feel like really angry or really upset. Others feel it in their gut, in their stomach, where it starts to churn, and it starts to feel like something is happening, like they feel off, they feel sick. So where do you feel it in your body physically? And it's sometimes even catching that emotion in a physical symptom without even sometimes fully knowing what is coming on, what kind of feeling coming on. And stopping and allowing yourself to breathe first and foremost, just to take a second to even be in that space, right? To create a little bit of space without kind of moving further, because usually when we're experiencing something and it shows up in a physical symptom, and then next thing you know, there's other things that show up, and it just kind of takes itself in a process, or it takes off without us being able to grab it and sort of catch ourselves. So and I know there's a lot said about breathing. I do think that when you breathe, your body has this, gets that extra oxygen, and it allows you to collect yourself, or at least catch yourself in that moment, and collect yourself for that moment. The third thing, so catch yourself, sort of stop, breathe, and the third thing is ask yourself, how appropriate is my emotional reaction in this situation? Again, there's nothing wrong with experiencing emotions. It is all about the reaction that you're having. So am I sort of feeling, is the situation really, does it validate me feeling this way? This feeling really, really upset, or is it something else that I'm already upset about, or that I've been upset with for a while, that's just been sitting in the background, And this what's happening right now is causing me to kind of, really feel very upset, because now I'm combusting and like bringing it all together, and I'm feeling this way. It's all sort of coming out now because I've just been pushed finally really far, but I've been pushing down and shoving down those emotions and haven't allowed myself to express them before. The next question is, what story am I telling myself about the situation? And very often the story is what can be causing that button and can be causing that trigger. So, is there any other story that has happened, or is there an experience that happened in the past that created a story that, all people expect, this, or all people are so unfair? Whatever it is that the story that we've created for ourselves, and it could be something that goes really deep into our childhood. And it's something that would probably might not even be something that you'd be able to answer right away in that moment, but at least you're in a place of curiosity, in a place of inquiry, without judging yourself. It's just being kind of in the sense of wonder of I actually sort of am feeling, or feeling like I'm going to overreact a little bit. This is a completely inappropriate reaction this way. It's for example, somebody took your cup at the office, right? And you feel so mad and angry about it. I mean, if you think about the appropriateness of being very angry about the situation, it is a relative thing, but for most people, it would not be something they would consider appropriate. It's not a big deal. Nothing happened to you. Nothing happened to the cup. Somebody just took it by mistake. But you're feeling very angry. So do you feel, is that a story that people, don't respect you, that people don't respect your boundaries, or, as parents or spouses sometimes have stories that they create about others? I know a lot of mothers, when kids don't clean up after themselves or leave stuff around. I know a lot of mothers, I've been there myself, and I talk to clients who say, they do this on purpose, they do this to cause my reaction. So, what is that story that you're telling yourself and that you're bringing forward based on what's happening? The other thing that's very helpful is to ask yourself, what else is going on here? Like I said, there could be something else that's going on in the background, and maybe you've been feeling stressed over the last little while, and this is all sort of, the stress can cause us to sometimes be exhausted physically and emotionally, and that's when, we feel like it could be like a breakdown, or a moment where, you really feel overwhelmed, and this one thing, like that last straw that broke the camel's back, is causing you to overreact right now. So it's kind of being in that place of curiosity and wonder about your own reactions. And when you are able to be in curiosity, you actually sort of can watch yourself like it's a movie, like you're part of a scene in a movie. And then it's more about really understanding kind of who you are and how you are being right now. It's sort of slightly out of body experience, which allows you to learn about yourself and see yourself in a particular situation. And the last thing is, asking yourself, if the situation comes up again, how will I handle myself? I understand, we all have things that can cause us to be upset, but it's understanding, what about the situation that causes us to be upset? And then once we understand that, if a similar situation comes up, we can decide in advance how we want to react to it. And there's that sense of not anticipation, but a sense of knowledge and a sense of tuning into yourself and understanding kind of how you react to things, so you can actually be in control of your reactions and be in control of how the world comes at you. And when you have that clarity, you can actually anticipate things happening, and you can get to a place of where, before that emotion takes you to a different place that you don't want to go to, you can stop yourself, or at least kind of calm yourself down, so that you don't feel like your reaction was inappropriate. So I'm hoping that this was helpful. I'm hoping that you can, at least in the times that you feel that you have a lot of emotions coming on, the emotional journal, or at least writing things down of if you want to watch certain patterns, and we all have patterns, and we all have certain things that cause us to be upset or cause us to be a certain way. So if you want to pay attention, then I definitely suggest you start writing those things down, and you can see kind of how your emotions or your emotional reactions change. I do think that it's helpful to do that so that you can create a lot more awareness and clarity with yourself. And by no means this is about judgment of yourself. It's about understanding where you're at today and seeing how you can take it forward and create more clarity with yourself and more understanding about some of the stories that maybe you've created, and also how you move through life, so that if you are unhappy with how you react to certain situations or how similar situations and people cause you to react, then you actually have a sense that you can do something about it. So thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you or being here next week. And if there's anything that was specifically stood out for you in this video, or you have your ways that you deal with triggers and emotions that were not mentioned here that you want to share, please do so. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.